Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Alicia Watley.
I'm Tim Havler.
And I'm Mike Brode.
So, Mike, what's the scenario?
I get to do the scenario this time.
You get to do the scenario this time. Lucky
Yay.
you.
Happy days.
Oh,
know,
Tim.
poor Tim.
You get to do this all the time.
Right. It's my turn.
Okay.
We have other stories we'd like to share.
Fair enough.
All right. So how about this one? We have Mungle's Crackers, and they manufacture crackers that are shaped like exotic land and sea animals, among other types of food products. Apparently, there was a bad batch of their latest line of petty pies because reports of moldy bags of pastries covered their social media, and they had to recall many bags of the high fructose treats. One angry customer got ill after a snack that has already filed a lawsuit against the company. So this notice of loss landed on the desk of our adjuster, who's Ralph. Ralph's relatively new to insurance and totally new to commercial lines. So Ralph would like to be walked through how to approach this claim from a coverage perspective and claims in general.
Okay. And Mike's going to take us through.
I think I like Tim's stories better.
Mike, did you make this story?
Our wonderful producer Brennan may have, but
okay. I was wondering about some of the names in there.
I liked it. See, Brennan's thing was mungle, rhymed with fungal, which see, there was moldy food. See? Huh?
This is what happens when you snack throughout the day.
Got food on the mind.
Food related scenarios. All right, so Mike, how do they decide where to start with this particular claim?
Well, I appreciate, Alicia, that you used the word decide, because you know me, Mike Brode, simple man, doing the best I can, right? So when I was newer to claims and I had to figure out a way to kind of work through coverage, I came up with that acronym, DECIDE, to help me get through it. How do you like that?
Wait, you came up with it?
Well, yeah.
Okay. All right, so decide. There are how many letters in that?
Oh, geez.
6 letters.
All right.
Do those letters stand for something? Since
no,
it's an acronym.
I just got to decide, so that's all. Of course they do, Alicia. You're right. It's an acronym. So you want to find out what they're about? Huh?
Yeah, let's hear them.
I'm waiting with bated breath. Come on.
So here you go. So for me, the first one would be the D, and decide would be your declarations page, because your declarations page sheet tells you all the cool stuff about your policy, about your insured, your limits, all that fun stuff. Then the next one, E, would stand for endorsements, which would be all the cool Hollywood stars that endorsed your moldy food product, right? No! Endorsements in the insurance world, of course, are any of those little endorsements that are attached to policies that might clarify or change coverage. So they're things that you definitely want to look at in your investigation. That brings us to C, which are the conditions. So here are the things that the insured and the insurance company need to do in order to make sure that coverage applies. Curious about what the I is?
I have no guess.
Alicia?
Can I take a stab and maybe it has something to do with insurance?
Very close. Yes, the insuring agreement. So here you got your broad promise of coverage that the contract is supposed to provide to the insured. Then where's that get us to? DECI. So the next D stands for the definitions. So a lot of terms in a policy are defined, and they're in what, Tim? Quotes, right?
So that's right, or bold sometimes, but usually quotes.
Usually quotes, could be bold, but those are all terms that are defined in the policy. So then you can look to the definitions section, because those often will either alter, change, grant or take away coverages sometimes just by how something is defined in the contract. So you want to check those out. And then finally, I think we're finally there. DECID, then E. The second E here stands for your exclusions. So anything, the insuring agreement that we talked about way back on I is pretty broad. So it can be a very broad grant of coverage. Then the exclusions kind of tailor that. Kind of say, here's the things we really want to cover. Here's the things we don't want to cover. So you got to go through a step-by-step process and decide.
I like it.
Thank
I've
you.
always been a big fan of checklists. Like a pilot's got their checklist. I think an insurance adjuster should have their checklist. Sometimes the policy itself is a good checklist because it's got everything laid out nicely. But I like this even better because we got a cool mnemonic. Did I say that right? Mnemonic, I think is the word.
Isn't it a collector of coins, Tim? Isn't
that numismatic?
Oh, okay. I was close.
I don't think that's even close.
I know. It doesn't have to start with a P or something too.
Maybe.
It could start with a P and still start with the N.
I never won any spelling bees.
Me neither.
So Mike,
Yes.
if we go through our decide acronym and maybe we find something that we're not quite sure about, or we're still investigating and coverage is still uncertain about something, what can we do?
We can even go back to this scenario, maybe because Ralph is new, so he's gone through decide. One of the things maybe is if you had a faulty food product, that there might be folks that would say, hey, we need to remove this from your shelves. So there's kind of like a recall thing. So that might be something that maybe isn't covered under the contract. If you go through your decide analysis, there may be an E, an exclusion that might apply there. So the one thing you could do if you come up with these coverage issues, of course, is send out a reservation of rights letter. So reservation of rights letter, at least to me, you're the attorney, so you help me out, Tim. But here we would spell out, hey, we're still investigating coverage on this, not making a determination yet. So we want to put you on notice as the insured that, hey, here's some potential issues with coverage on this claim, on this case. We would spell out the policy language that's at issue. And then spell out that, hey, just by investigating, we're not saying we're going to cover something. We're not going to cover it. We're not making any decisions yet. And number two, we're not waiving any of our rights, and you're not waiving any of your rights. So a reservation of rights letter can let your insured know that, hey, we got some things to look at here, that potentially there's some coverage issues, but we're still investigating. And we can alert them about once we finalize our coverage investigation, then we can come up with our determination. But while we're investigating, it's smart to do it under a reservation of rights.
Yes, a valuable tool, those reservation of rights letters. So getting back to our claim we started with, let's walk through the decide and then see what we decide.
Okay. So let's see. First, declarations. We'd want to know a few things. Who do we insure? So we're hoping we insure this food products place. We'd want to know also what are the effective dates. So did this thing fall within coverage under our policy just based on when it happened or when it was reported? We'd also like to know, is this the insured's business? Is it their proper address? What are their limits? And then we want to go to the 1E on endorsements, Tim. We good with the declarations page? Anything else?
I'm good so far.
All right. So here, endorsement wise, yeah, you probably want to know, do we have any kind of food product recall coverage? Is there some exclusion? Do we maybe not cover that product? Do we cover that product? Is there any other parties that might be insured under the contract as well? So all the endorsements, maybe there's special limits of liability for this kind of thing. So any of those things potentially could be spelled out in the endorsements section. So you want to make sure once we look at the declarations, understand who we're supposed to insure. The endorsements might clarify some of the intent there.
Okay.
And then under the conditions, here, some things that might be interesting are a couple. Number one, our insurer's got to cooperate with us. So please talk to us, help us out in the investigation. And another one here, maybe let's say our insured did something crazy and wanted to send out $50 coupons to everybody who had some kind of product that was potentially and allegedly moldy. And so they sent out billions of dollars worth of these $50 coupons, and then went back to the insurance company and said, now reimburse me. Wait a minute. There's something in there about voluntary payments. So insured can't go out and start making voluntary payments without making us aware of it and also getting our okay before they kind of jump into there. So there's a couple conditions that might apply to Ralph's claim. And then the insuring agreement. I think any kind of injury type case is going to deal with an occurrence, which would be an accident that caused what, bodily injury or property damage. So as long as we've had an occurrence, an accident, we didn't intentionally make moldy product, it just happened. And then number two, did it lead to a bodily injury or property damage to the folks that were affected? That would be in your insuring agreement. We good so far?
Good so far. I think we're probably getting to the hard part now.
Potentially, and that's where I might need your help too, Tim. I might even reach out to you and do a coverage question through plrb.org.
Oh, that would be a good idea. Although
We
we
could
might
do
have
that.
to get Michelle involved.
That's right.
She's the liability expert.
That would be a good deal, but the definition. So here, any of those highlighted, bolded, italicized, sometimes in quotes words. So here, like we just talked about in the insuring agreement, occurrence would be one of the words that's in quotes. So there would be a definition of that, as well as stuff like bodily injury. So what does that mean? You would go to the definitions section to check that out. What is property damage? So would just moldy products on the shelf be property damage? It's your product, which would also be a defined term. So there'd be plenty of defined terms here, Tim, that we would have to look at before we get there. And going back to the endorsements, there might even be some of those crazy endorsements that might modify or change some of those defined terms too. So that's why you always got to check those out. And exclusions, there might be. So I think if Ralph looks here, he might find one on recall. There's one recall sistership type exclusions under a GL policy. If this was some kind of an intentional thing, there might be something there about that. So those would be a few of the things that potentially might come up in Ralph's claim as he's looking at coverage, which is the first block of stuff you always do as a good claims rep, is check into your coverage. Working through the decide piece, he would come to the, hopefully, full analysis of his claim and be ready to either maybe do that reservation of rights letter if there was still some issues, or know that coverage is either good, or he can even potentially decline coverage if it's clear that there's nothing here that was alleged that would be covered. What do you think?
Sounds good. And if he did all that and still doesn't know, he's going to the reservation of rights.
Right. And of course, you can always go to your manager, supervisor is always a good person to run things by, especially if you're new. Or something we used to do back in the day was we'd actually roundtable these cases. So if I'm a newer rep, get together with some of the more experienced folks, run the scenario by them. You could show them, look, I went through this cool decide analysis, and here's kind of where I'm leaning. What do you all think? So roundtable it around. That could be a great way.
All right, cool.
All right. So what would be the next step, or have we reached the end?
Potentially, but let's say that we're leaning towards, we said there was a lawsuit filed on this one, right? Right, Alicia? Alicia, you haven't got a word in edgewise. Alicia, there was a lawsuit filed on this one, right?
There was.
Right. So
there was
now
a bad batch of their latest line of platy pies. Probably looking like a bunch of platypus.
Right.
Platypus.
It had a bunch of moldy something on them. So there's already been a lawsuit filed, which means we probably have some kind of suit papers out there that Ralph would want to get a hold of from our insured too. Because that might change our approach too, because you have a lawsuit filed. We'd have to look through all the allegations in that thing, Tim, and see if some of them might bring this into, if not coverage, at least if there's some of the allegations in there that would bring up a duty to defend, which can be broader than your duty to provide coverage. We definitely would want to get counsel involved and defend our insured if a defense was due. So that would probably be the next step, looking at those lawsuit allegations and deciding if we owe a defense to our insured. What do you think?
Don't eat moldy pies, kids.
That would be a good thing too.
All right, so Mike, what can we take away from this scenario?
Well, Alicia, coverage on any kind of claim, and this doesn't just apply to commercial claims. This wonderful decide that I came up with, or somebody came up with, and maybe I
That you stole.
borrowed, I don't know, but I'm taking credit for it.
Okay.
If you go through this systematic approach, it can help you on coming up with coverage analysis on any type of claim, personal lines, homeowner, auto, general liability, anything. So if you go through the cool decide acronym, look at your declarations page. What endorsements are attached to that, Alicia, that might change coverage? Alter it, take it away, give it back, limit it. Who knows what could be found under those wonderful endorsements? And then conditions. What do we both sides, the insurance company and the insured, have to do in order to make sure that they've met all policy conditions, which would also affect coverage? Then you go to your contract itself. What's the insuring agreement? What broad promise did we make to this insured? Then we have our defined terms, which insuring agreement itself has some defined terms. Throughout the policy contract, you're going to find all these cool special terms that are italicized, quoted, bolded. They're going to be defined there somewhere. So check out your definition side, because that can definitely change coverage, alter it, change it, affect it, maybe provide some, take some away, who knows? And then the last one, the E, and decide, is your exclusions. So after we have this broad insuring agreement, we've gone through all the definitions. Now the exclusions can tailor it even more. Maybe there's something here that just isn't going to be covered because it's a risk that shouldn't be covered under this type of contract. Maybe there's a better contract out there. Maybe this is some kind, it's not fortuitous that it just happened. So exclusions tailor that broad insuring agreement. So you go through, decide, make your decision, and then handle the claim appropriately. Huh?
All right.
Tim, you get my favorite part of each of these podcasts, because now we're nearing the end. So we always go with, hey, where can adjuster go to get more information about this cool stuff, Tim?
I'm so glad you asked, because PLRB's wonderful education department has numerous materials on these types of adjusting skills.
Right.
In particular, we have a couple of claims chat. We have a two-parter, actually. It's titled, Can You Help Me Walk Through a Claim? Part 1 and 2, that can be found on PLRB's website and the Education Hub. We also have another course called Simple Approach to Coverage Decisions, and again, can be found in PLRB's Education Hub. But Alicia, if you could do me a favor, rather than just saying they're on the hub, maybe we could link to these in the show notes.
We can absolutely link those in our show notes. Can't talk today.
Easy for you to say, Alicia.
I know. So we're going to have those links in the show notes. We're going to have a recap of the key points from this episode. We're going to have links to our social media. We're going to have information on how to submit your own adjuster story. And don't forget, you can listen to our podcast on YouTube.
Yay!
So give us a high rating, 5-star rating. Give us a nice subscribe, and we will see you all next time.
And even better, let's say on those adjuster stories, Alicia, that you're talking about, what if somebody could get back to us and say how they use decide to decide coverage on their case? Wouldn't that be fun?
Sure.
That would be fun.
Sure.
Yay!
So make sure you have a story like that ready. We'd love to hear it.
Right. All right.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. See you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies and counsel as appropriate.